On the rocky, desert-like planet of Valdrar, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a dim orange glow across the jagged landscape. It was a world of heat and dust, where life struggled to survive under the harsh conditions. Tall mountains loomed. In the distance, their peaks lost in the swirling sandstorms. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and dried plants. This was a place where survival meant strength, and the strong ruled. A small group of tribal aliens with skin like rough stone and eyes that gleamed like molten metal stood in a circle around a stone altar. Their leader, a towering figure with scars crisscrossing his face, stepped forward, holding a long ceremonial blade. His name was Karok, and his tribe had lived on this planet for centuries, their customs unbroken by time or the outside world. They believed in the power of their gods, and it was their ritual to offer sacrifices to them to ensure their survival. Today, the tribe had a special offering, a human woman. Her name was Maria. She had crashed on this planet a few days ago after her ship malfunctioned while she was on a routine mission. She was part of an exploration team sent to chart new worlds and gather information for her people. But now she was alone, tied to the stone altar, with no way to escape. She had never imagined her life would end like this, in the hands of a primitive alien tribe on a desert world. Maria's heart raced as she struggled against her bonds. Her wrists were tied tightly with thick vines, and her ankles were bound with a rope that cut into her skin. She had tried to escape earlier, but the aliens had captured her quickly, their strength far beyond anything she had ever known. Now, she was at their mercy, helpless as they prepared her for the ritual. The sound of chanting filled the air, a deep rhythmic hum that made Maria's skin crawl. The aliens were performing their ancient ceremony, a ritual that they believed would please their gods and bring them good fortune. She could hear the words, but they made no sense to her. The language was strange, like the sound of 1,000 voices echoing through the desert wind. The leader, Karok, raised his blade high, his eyes gleaming with dark intent. Maria's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out. She had been trained for dangerous situations, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. She was no soldier, no warrior. She was just an explorer, a scientist, but she wasn't going to die here, not like this. Not without a fight. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from behind the group of aliens. Maria's eyes widened as she saw something moving in the distance. It was a ship, a human ship. Her heart leaped in her chest. Was it one of her people? Had someone come to rescue her? The ship was descending quickly, its engines roaring as it cut through the air, kicking up dust and sand in its wake. Karok and the other aliens turned to look at the ship, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and surprise. They had never seen a craft like this before, and for a moment they hesitated, unsure of what to do. But Karok quickly regained his composure and motioned for his warriors to prepare for the worst. The ship landed with a loud thud, and its hatch opened, revealing a human figure. It was a man, tall and strong, wearing a sleek, futuristic suit of armor. He moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the area as he stepped out of the ship. The wind blew his dark hair back, and he held a weapon in his hand, a sleek energy rifle that hummed with power. He was a soldier, and he had come for Maria. The tribal aliens raised their weapons, primitive spears and axes, and growled in warning. But the human soldier didn't flinch. He raised his rifle, aiming it at the group of aliens. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Step away from her," he commanded. "I'm not here to negotiate." Karok snarled and stepped forward, his weapon raised. "You are too late, human. The sacrifice must be made. Our gods demand it." The soldier didn't hesitate. With a single shot, he fired a blast of energy that struck the ground near Karok's feet, sending a shock wave through the air. The ground trembled as the aliens took a step back, startled by the power of the weapon. The soldier's eyes narrowed. I said, step away. Karok hesitated for a moment, then barked an order to his warriors. Attack! The aliens charged forward, their weapons raised high. The soldier didn't move. He simply leveled his rifle and fired again. One by one, the alien warriors fell, their bodies collapsing in a heap as the energy blasts struck them. With deadly precision, it was clear that the human was no ordinary fighter. He was a trained soldier, skilled in combat, and his weapons were far more advanced than anything the tribe had ever seen. Maria watched in awe as the soldier took down the aliens with ease. She had never seen anything like it. The soldier's movements were fluid, controlled, and precise. Each shot was calculated, each step taken with purpose. He wasn't just fighting for her, he was fighting for his own survival, and he was winning. But Karok was not easily intimidated. The tribal leader bellowed in rage and charged at the soldier, his blade raised high. The human soldier ducked to the side, narrowly avoiding the swing of the blade. He lashed out with a swift kick, knocking Karok to the ground. The tribal leader scrambled to his feet, but the soldier was already on top of him. In a blur of motion, he disarmed Karok, knocking the blade from his hands and pinning him to the ground. Karok struggled, but the soldier's strength was too much. The alien leader gasped for breath, his face contorted in pain. You may have won this battle, human, Karok growled, but you will not defeat us all. The soldier looked down at him, his expression cold. I don't need to defeat all of you. Just you. With that, he slammed Karok's head against the ground, knocking him unconscious. The remaining aliens, seeing their leader defeated, hesitated. They had never faced a human like this before. They had underestimated him, and now they were afraid. The soldier stood up and turned toward Maria. She was still bound to the altar, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. The soldier walked toward her, his movements calm, yet there was a sense of urgency in the air. He knelt down and cut the ropes that bound her wrists. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle. Maria nodded, still in shock from the events that had just unfolded. She had never imagined that someone would come to her rescue. She had thought she was going to die here on this strange planet, at the hands of these alien savages, but now there was hope. The human had come for her, and he had saved her. Thank you, she whispered, her voice shaking. Thank you for saving me. The soldier gave her a small smile. It's not over yet, he said, standing up and extending his hand to her. We've got to get out of here. Maria stood shakily, still in shock from the events that had just unfolded. The sound of her heartbeat was loud in her ears, and her legs felt weak beneath her. She looked at the soldier, whose calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos that had just occurred. His eyes were focused, scanning the area as he kept his hand on the weapon at his side, ready for anything. The tribal aliens, now leaderless, were retreating into the shadows, their eyes still filled with fear. They had never encountered a human like this before, one who was calm, powerful, and completely unfazed by their rituals and weapons. They knew better than to challenge him further, and so they slinked away into the dust, their grumbling voices, disappearing into the distance. Maria took a deep breath and forced herself to focus. She was free. The thought hit her like a wave, almost overwhelming her. She could hardly believe it. She had been certain she was going to die in that ritual. But now, this stranger had come from nowhere, taken on an entire tribe, and saved her life. She didn't know what to say to him. The soldier noticed her staring at him and gave her a small nod, as though to acknowledge her gratitude. He didn't speak, but his eyes were filled with understanding. He knew the gravity of what had just happened, and that Maria must be feeling lost and confused. She was a stranger on this planet, just like him, and now they had to work together. If they were going to survive, Maria finally found her voice. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. Her throat felt dry and her words felt heavy in the air. The soldier didn't immediately answer. He looked at her for a moment, as though considering her question. "I'm just someone who couldn't stand by and watch you die," he said simply. His tone was blunt, matter of fact. Maria felt a strange sense of relief wash over her at his words. She had expected him to say something more complicated, more military or formal, but instead, he was straightforward and honest. She appreciated that. "I thought I was done for," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I didn't think anyone would come for me." The soldier gave her a brief, reassuring smile. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "We'll get you out of here." Maria nodded, trying to steady herself. The soldier began to walk toward the wreckage of the ship that had crashed earlier. Maria followed him, her steps slow but determined. She could hear the soft crunch of sand beneath her boots as they moved. The ship had landed not far from the ritual site, and it had taken a heavy hit. The back half of it was partially buried in the sand, and the engines were smoking faintly. When they reached the ship, the soldier opened a hatch at the back and gestured for Maria to go inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the harshness of the planet outside. The walls were lined with metal panels, and soft blue lights illuminated the narrow corridor. Maria took a moment to appreciate the cool air inside, her body grateful for the brief respite. The soldier moved quickly, his steps purposeful as he activated the ship's console. "I need to check the systems," he said. "Make sure we're still able to leave." Maria nodded, watching him as he worked. It was clear that this man was no ordinary soldier. His movements were practiced, precise, and efficient. He knew exactly what he was doing. Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how effortlessly he moved through the controls. She had been trained as an explorer, but she was no engineer. Watching him made her feel like a child, helpless and small. "So," the soldier said, breaking the silence, "what's your name?" "Maria," she replied. "I'm part of an exploration team. We were sent to map out this region of the galaxy. I didn't expect to crash." The soldier paused, his fingers stilling on the console. He looked over his shoulder at her. "What happened? Was it an accident?" Maria shook her head. "No. The ship was sabotaged. I don't know who did it. All I know is that we were attacked. The others, my crew, didn't make it. I was the only one to survive the crash." The soldier's expression softened, and for the first time she saw a hint of sympathy in his eyes. He didn't say anything, but the silence between them spoke volumes. It was clear that Maria's story had affected him, though he tried to hide it behind a tough exterior. "Sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to bring that up. It's just—" She trailed off, unsure of how to continue. She had been alone for so long, and now, for the first time since the crash, she felt like she wasn't entirely alone. The soldier turned back to the console, tapping a few more keys. "It's all right. It's important that we get you out of here. We'll figure out what happened, but for now, I need to focus on getting this ship ready. We don't know when those aliens will come back." Maria understood the urgency in his voice. She nodded, grateful for the distraction of something to do. The soldier was right. They couldn't afford to stay on this planet any longer than necessary. The tribal aliens might have retreated for now, but they wouldn't stay away forever. And Maria wasn't about to wait around for them to come back. She watched the soldier work for a few moments, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie with him. He was a stranger, yet he had saved her life. She had always been taught to trust people. Humanity was about cooperation and helping others, after all, but this man had taken the trust she offered and used it to help her survive. He wasn't like the aliens who had captured her. He was different, and Maria felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in days. The soldier finished with the console and stood up. He wiped his hands on his suit and turned to face her. "We're good to go," he said, his voice low but confident. "We'll take off in a few minutes." Maria smiled, a mixture of relief and gratitude flooding her chest. She could hardly believe it. They were leaving. She was going to survive. She hadn't been sure for a long time whether she would ever make it off this planet. But now it seemed possible. "Thank you," she said again, her voice quieter this time but full of emotion. You saved my life." The soldier gave her a quick nod, but there was no boastfulness in his gesture. "It's what I do." With that, he walked toward the cockpit. Maria followed him, moving slowly but with purpose. When they reached the front of the ship, the soldier seated himself in the pilot's chair and began to power up the engines. Maria took a seat next to him, watching as he deftly manipulated the controls. The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life, and the sound of the thrusters filled the small space. The soldier glanced at her. "Ready?" he asked. Maria nodded. She was more than ready. She was eager to leave this planet behind, to leave the terror and the pain of the past few days behind her. She wanted to go home. But she also knew that her journey wasn't over. She had questions about who had sabotaged her ship, and why, but for now those could wait. For now, the only thing that mattered was escaping this nightmare. As the ship slowly lifted off the ground and ascended into the sky, Maria looked out the window at the planet below. It was still a harsh, unforgiving world, but now it was shrinking away. With each passing second, it became smaller and smaller until it was just a speck in the distance. Maria sat back in her seat, finally allowing herself to breathe. She was alive, and for the first time in days, she felt like there was hope again. The ship ascended higher into the sky, leaving the barren planet behind. The tribal settlement, once a place of terror for Maria, now seemed like a distant memory. The roar of the engines filled the cockpit, but for a moment, everything else was quiet. Maria sat in her seat, her hands resting on her lap, trying to absorb the overwhelming relief. She was safe, or so she thought. As the ship soared into the atmosphere, the human soldier, whose name she still didn't know, focused on the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. Maria glanced over at him, watching his calm demeanor. His skill as a pilot was evident. He was at ease, as though flying was second nature to him. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Her eyes kept drifting back to the planet below, still visible through the small window. It was now a shrinking ball of dust and sand, but in the distance Maria thought she saw something. A small speck moving against the landscape, like a shadow that shouldn't be there. "Do you see that?" she asked, pointing at the distant speck. The soldier, without a word, glanced out the window and then returned to his instruments. He didn't answer, but Maria saw the shift in his posture, his body tense, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had seen it too. Maria's stomach tightened. "What is it?" she pressed, her voice a little more anxious this time. The soldier didn't respond immediately. He reached forward, adjusting some settings on the console. The ship shuddered as the thrusters kicked into higher gear, pushing them further into the sky. But the speck on the planet below didn't fade. It was growing larger. Maria's pulse quickened as she realized what it might be. "Are we being followed?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The soldier didn't answer her question. Instead, he increased speed. His eyes locked on the display. His expression remained unreadable, but Maria could sense his urgency. He wasn't just a pilot. He was also a soldier, and something about the way he moved told her that he was ready for whatever came next. Minutes passed, but the object below them was still growing, no matter how much distance they gained. It was following them. The soldier's voice broke the silence. "Hold on," he said quietly. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now. Suddenly, the ship jolted, and Maria was thrown back against her seat. Her heart skipped a beat as the ship lurched violently to one side, sending her crashing against the armrest. The alarms blared, a harsh, shrill noise that filled the cockpit. Red lights flashed around them, casting an eerie glow across the walls. "We've got company," the soldier said with a cold efficiency. Maria scrambled to her seatbelt, tightening it as quickly as she could. The soldier's hands moved quickly, adjusting controls and preparing for what was coming. The ship was shaking more, violently now, as though something was trying to pull them back down to the surface. "What is that?" Maria gasped, her eyes wide as she saw the silhouette of another ship appearing in the distance. This one was much larger and faster, closing the gap between them with terrifying speed. "It's a fighter ship," the soldier explained, his voice grim. "The tribal aliens have ships too, and I think they've just called for reinforcements." Maria's heart sank as she realized what that meant. They hadn't escaped yet. They were still in danger. Without warning, the fighter ship opened fire, sending a burst of energy toward them. The soldier yanked the controls to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast. The ship rocked violently, but he kept them steady. "Hold tight," he ordered again. The fighter ship was closing in on them, its weapons firing again, each blast narrowly missing. The soldier's face remained focused, but Maria could see the tension in his jaw. He was calm, but only just. "We can't outrun them at this speed," he muttered to himself. He glanced at the display, making quick calculations. "We'll need to fight." Maria's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. A part of her still couldn't believe she was in this situation. One minute she had been tied to a stone altar, the next she was flying in a ship with a soldier who had saved her life, and now they were being hunted by alien forces. She wanted to ask him more questions, to understand more about what was going on, but the moment was too urgent. Instead, she focused on the ship's controls, her fingers gripping the armrest tightly as she steadied herself. "We need a plan," Maria said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "What do we do?" The soldier's eyes flicked to her, briefly, then back to the display. He didn't speak at first, but then, with a sigh, he nodded. "I'll take the controls. You—" He hesitated. "You stay here and brace yourself. Don't touch anything unless I tell you to." Maria nodded quickly, not wanting to argue. She could see that the soldier knew what he was doing, and she trusted him. She wasn't a fighter. She didn't even know how to handle a weapon. But she had to do whatever it took to survive. The fighter ship fired again, and this time the soldier reacted faster. He yanked the ship hard to the left, the entire craft veering sharply as the blast missed them by mere inches. The ship shuddered as they went into a steep dive, and Maria's stomach dropped. The air felt thick and heavy, and she had to hold onto the armrests to keep from being thrown out of her seat. "Get ready," the soldier said, his voice sharp now. "They'll be closing in for another attack." Maria didn't know what to do except hold on and trust him. She couldn't see the alien ship, but she could feel its presence, just behind them, moving fast and unpredictable. It was like a predator hunting its prey, circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, just as the fighter ship prepared for another attack, the soldier performed a risky maneuver. He pulled the ship into a sudden spin, flinging the fighter ship off course. It was a move that seemed almost impossible, but the soldier made it look easy. The fighter ship tried to follow, but it couldn't keep up. The soldier's eyes never left the display, his fingers dancing over the controls with precision. "They're not done yet," he muttered under his breath. Maria could hear the fighter ship's engines grow louder, and then, to her shock, another set of lights appeared. Another ship, larger, stronger. This time, the soldier's expression darkened. "It's a warship," he said, barely able to keep the edge of fear from his voice. The warship was much bigger than anything they'd seen before, a massive black silhouette with red lights flashing ominously. The fighter ship that had been chasing them suddenly pulled back, its mission complete. But now they were up against the full force of the enemy. Maria's heart raced. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. The soldier didn't answer at first. He was too focused on the controls, pulling and pushing buttons in a flurry of motion. "Hold on," he said again. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." With a sudden blast of speed, the soldier swung the ship around, moving directly toward the warship. Maria's breath caught in her throat. They were going to confront it. But she knew, deep down, that they had no other choice. The warship loomed ahead, its massive silhouette blocking out the stars as it grew larger with each passing second. Maria's heart raced in her chest as she gripped the edge of her seat, the tension in the air so thick it was almost suffocating. The soldier, still calm but focused, expertly maneuvered their ship to avoid the barrage of fire coming from the warship. His hands were steady on the controls, his eyes sharp and calculating. Maria couldn't understand how he remained so calm. Just moments ago, she had been certain they would die, trapped between the tribal aliens and the brutal power of the warship. But the soldier had kept his cool, his mind working like a well-oiled machine, and now they were facing down an enemy ship that could easily wipe them out with one blast. He didn't seem to care. To him, it was just another fight to win. "How are we going to get away from this?" Maria asked, her voice a mixture of fear and awe. "We're not running," the soldier replied, his tone flat. "We're going to fight." Maria's eyes widened. "Fight? Against that?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief as she looked. "At the warship." The soldier didn't answer. Instead, he pulled back on the throttle, sending the ship into a sharp turn. The ship's engines screamed as they changed direction, veering around a series of asteroid-like rocks floating in space. The warship followed, its massive guns firing once more, the blasts shaking their ship. Maria was thrown against her seat as the ship rocked from the impact. "We need a plan," Maria said, her voice tight with panic. "There's no way we can take that thing down." The soldier didn't look at her, but he spoke calmly. "It's not about taking it down. It's about surviving long enough to escape." He pressed a few buttons, and a set of controls lit up in front of him. Maria watched in confusion as he activated a sequence of commands. A small holographic map appeared on the screen, showing the layout of the area they were in. The soldier quickly scanned it, his eyes moving from one point to another. "We can use the debris field ahead," he muttered. "We'll hide in there, confuse their targeting system." Maria didn't have time to process what he said. The warship fired again, and this time the blast hit their ship's shields, causing the entire vessel to shudder violently. A loud alarm blared, and red lights flashed all around them. "Shields holding at 45%, the soldier said calmly, his voice unwavering. "But we can't take many more hits like that." He turned back to the controls, his fingers dancing across the buttons. With practiced ease, Maria watched, her stomach twisting with every move. This soldier was calm, but even he couldn't hide the fact that their situation was dire. The warship was relentless, and their shields wouldn't last forever. Suddenly, a strange whirring sound filled the cockpit. Maria looked up to see a small panel above them, flashing with a red light. The soldier's eyes flicked to the panel for a moment before he slammed his fist against it, swearing under his breath. "Not now," he muttered to himself. "What's wrong?" Maria asked, her voice strained. "We've got a malfunction," the soldier said, his voice low. "One of the thrusters is overheating. We won't be able to make the turn we need to lose them." Maria's heart sank. "What do we do now?" The soldier didn't hesitate. "I'm going to need you to help me," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "I can't do this alone." Maria's eyes widened. "Help you? How?" "I need you to go to the engine room," he said quickly. "There's a secondary coolant valve there. I need you to activate it manually. If we don't get the thruster under control, we won't be able to make it through the debris field." Maria nodded, though she had no idea how she would manage it. She wasn't an engineer, she was a scientist, an explorer, not a mechanic. But she had to try. They had no other choice. "Stay here and keep the ship steady," the soldier said. "I'll keep them distracted." Before she could say anything, he grabbed a weapon from a compartment beside his seat and headed toward the rear hatch of the cockpit. Maria's hands trembled as she quickly unbuckled her seatbelt, making her way to the back of the ship. The ship lurched again as the warship fired, and Maria barely managed to keep her balance as she moved through the narrow hallways. She reached the engine room, her mind racing. The walls were lined with pipes and control panels, all glowing faintly in the dim light. The air was thick with the smell of burning machinery, and Maria could hear the faint hum of the engines as they struggled to stay functional. She quickly scanned the room and spotted the coolant valve the soldier had mentioned. It was a large, heavy valve covered in a thick layer of dust. Maria swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. She wasn't sure what to do, but she had to figure it out quickly. She found a set of instructions printed on a nearby console, and with shaking hands she began to follow the steps. Meanwhile, back in the cockpit, the soldier was engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse. He was weaving the ship through space, using the debris field to block the warship's shots. He could hear the massive cannons firing, the shock waves rocking the ship, but he focused all his attention on the controls. He needed to keep the ship steady. He needed to buy them more time. The warship's captain, sensing that the human ship was trying to escape, ordered a full-power assault. The larger ship turned, its massive engines firing with brutal force, closing the gap between them. The soldier's eyes narrowed as he saw the weaponry powering up. "Come on, Maria," he muttered under his breath. "We can't let them catch us." Maria was in the engine room, her hands covered in grease as she twisted the valve open. The coolant began to flow, and she could hear the whirring sound of the thruster cooling down. She didn't know if it would be enough, but she had to trust that it would work. She wiped the sweat from her brow, her heart pounding as she moved back toward the cockpit. The ship was still shaking from the constant barrage of fire, but now the thrusters were steady again. She quickly climbed back into the cockpit, where the soldier was holding the ship's course with remarkable precision. "Did it work?" he asked, barely looking at her. Maria nodded, panting. "I think so." "Good," the soldier replied, his voice a little more relieved. "Now, let's finish this." He pulled a lever, and the ship shot forward, gaining speed. The warship was closing in, but the soldier had a plan. He steered the ship straight toward a massive asteroid that was drifting in space. The warship followed, unwilling to break its pursuit. At the last possible moment, the soldier yanked the ship hard to the left, threading it through a narrow gap between two asteroids. The warship was too large to follow, its bulk crashing into the rocky terrain. For a brief moment, the soldier allowed himself a small grin. "We've got them," he said. The warship, now stuck between the rocks, fired one last desperate shot, but it missed completely. The soldier guided their ship through the debris field, skillfully avoiding any more attacks. The warship was left behind, stuck in a dangerous position that would take it hours to escape. Maria breathed a sigh of relief. They were free. "Nice. Flying," she said, finally allowing herself to relax. The soldier gave her a quick glance, his expression unreadable. "It's not over yet," he said. "We still need to get out of here. We don't know if they'll send more ships after us." Maria nodded, her eyes scanning the stars outside. They had survived, but she knew the danger wasn't gone. For now, they had escaped, but the fight was far from over. The stars outside the ship's window stretched into long lines as the ship broke free from the danger of the asteroid field. The soldier's hands were still tight on the controls, his eyes scanning the display for any signs of pursuers. For the first time in hours, the shaking of the ship had stopped. The roar of the engines had softened to a dull hum, and the ship was gliding peacefully through space. Maria sat in the seat beside him, exhausted but grateful. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, and she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. They had made it out alive. Against all odds, they had survived the attack of the tribal aliens, and they had escaped the warship's pursuit. But Maria knew that this wasn't the end. She knew that their journey wasn't over yet. The soldier didn't speak for a long moment. He was focused on the stars ahead, but Maria could tell that his mind was working. He was calculating their next move, considering all the possibilities. She could see the tension in his face, the way his jaw was set tight. Despite their escape, he was still on alert. "We need to make a course change," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "If we stay on this course, they'll catch up with us eventually." Maria nodded. "What do we do?" The soldier turned to her, his eyes sharp and serious. "We need to find a place to hide, somewhere they won't think to look." Maria's stomach twisted with the thought of being pursued again. She had no desire to go back to the dangers of the planet or the warship, but she knew that the soldier was right. They couldn't just keep flying blindly into space. They had to make a plan. "What about the space station near the outer rim?" Maria suggested. "I heard about it during my last mission. It's a small station, abandoned, mostly used for research. It might be a good place to lay low." The soldier considered this for a moment. "Good idea," he said, nodding. "It's a risk, but it's better than being out here in the open." Without hesitation, he altered the ship's course, setting a new trajectory toward the outer rim. Maria could see the map on the display, a small, uninhabited part of space that was far from any major trade routes or military patrols. It was a perfect place to hide, at least for now. For the next few hours, the ship moved through the quiet expanse of space. The stars outside seemed to blink in and out of view as they passed by, and the silence inside the ship felt comforting, almost peaceful. But even as the ship sped toward the station, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being hunted. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Maria asked, breaking the silence. The soldier's voice was steady. "It's possible. They know we're still out here, and they won't stop until they find us." Maria swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. "What if we can't outrun them? What if they catch up?" "They won't," the soldier said with quiet confidence. "Not if we're careful. We've made it this far. We just need to keep our heads down and wait for the right moment." Maria nodded, but the unease in her chest didn't fade. She couldn't help but wonder if the soldier truly believed what he was saying, or if he was just trying to keep her calm. Either way, there was no going back now. They had to reach that station. Hours passed in tense silence as the ship moved steadily through the void of space. Maria had almost dozed off when the soldier's voice suddenly broke through the quiet. "We're almost there," he said. "Get ready." Maria sat up, her pulse quickening. She could see the station ahead now, a small gray structure floating in the distance. It looked abandoned, just as she had remembered. There were no lights, no signs of life. Just the cold, empty shell of a once-active research station. It was perfect for what they needed. The soldier expertly guided the ship into position, bringing it in for a smooth docking at the station's outer port. As the ship settled into place, the lights inside flickered briefly, casting long shadows across the cockpit. "We're here," the soldier said, his voice almost a whisper. "Now, we wait." Maria stood, feeling a rush of relief mixed with a growing sense of anxiety. They were safe, for now. But she knew this wasn't over. She couldn't let herself relax, not with the knowledge that the aliens could be out there, searching for them. As she followed the soldier into the station's airlock, she noticed the eerie silence that hung over the place. The station, once bustling with activity, now felt abandoned and forgotten. The air was thick with dust, and the faint hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that broke the stillness. The soldier quickly sealed the airlock behind them, then moved toward the control panel. He began to check the station's systems, making sure everything was secure. This place hasn't been used in years, he said, his voice low. It's a good place to hide, but we can't stay here long. We need to figure out our next move. Maria nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle heavily on her shoulders. What's our next move? The soldier turned to her, his eyes hard with resolve. We wait for now. We make sure we're not being followed. Once we're sure it's safe, we'll figure out how to get back to your people. Maria felt a pang of uncertainty at the mention of her people. She had been so focused on surviving, on getting away from the aliens, that she hadn't stopped to think about what would happen next. She didn't know where her crew was, or if anyone had survived. She didn't know if anyone would be able to find her. Do you think they're still alive? She asked, her voice quiet. My crew, I mean. The soldier's expression softened for just a moment. I don't know, but I'm not giving up on them. We'll find them, but for now we need to focus on getting you home. Maria nodded, grateful for his words, though she didn't entirely believe them. She couldn't afford to lose hope, not yet. She had to keep pushing forward, no matter what. As they moved deeper into the station, the soldier made sure to check every door, every control panel. It was a methodical, cautious process. Maria followed behind him, doing her best to keep her mind off the past few days. The memories of the tribal aliens, the warship, and the fear she had felt on that planet all felt distant now. But she couldn't forget. She wouldn't forget. Suddenly the soldier stopped, his hand resting on a console. His face was unreadable, but Maria could see the tension in his posture. Something's wrong, he muttered. What is it? Maria asked, her heart racing. The soldier's eyes flicked to the display in front of him, and Maria followed his gaze. The station's security system was showing a sudden blip, a ship coming in fast. It was a small, fast-moving vessel, and it was heading straight for them. We've got company, the soldier said, his voice cold. They've found us. Maria's stomach dropped. They hadn't been safe for long. The chase was on again.